Shalom and welcome to this teaching from Messianic Delaware. My name is Jerry Mitchell, and I want to thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to listen to these teachings. We dig through the language, the culture, and the history to reveal the truth that is found in the words of our Creator. And today we are going to look at divorce. Now, something I don't do very often is refer back to another teaching, but the teaching I did on marriage, if you didn't listen to that, you may want to go back and listen to that before you listen to this one. Not because this teaching won't stand on its own merits. I'm going to certainly try to do that. But you need to understand what marriage is in order to understand what divorce really is. And until you know that divorce is much more than just not being married, it certainly helps to know what marriage is. And the things that we covered in that teaching just barely scratch the surface of what marriage is, but it prepares you to understand better that divorce might not be what you think you thought it was. And I know that sounds kind of confusing, but as we muddle through this thing that we call divorce, this separation of a marriage, the end of a marriage, the termination of a marriage, however you want to phrase it, it's more than that. It goes far deeper and has much more meaning. Chill Wills was in the famous John Wayne Western McClintock in 1963. He played the character Drago, and one of the lines that he delivered was, "Divorce, ain't that what you call it when you pay a woman not to live with you?" And of course he was talking about the main character and his wife, who were going through a period of difficulty in their marriage. There was some things that the character of the lady wanted to do that she thought she was better than she actually was in her place in life, and she wanted to be fancy and spend all the money that they had made. And of course John Wayne's typical cowboy character was down to earth and just kept doing what he was doing. And you'll see where that comes into play here in just a little bit when we really start digging into what causes divorce. When we look at marriage, we know that marriage is a covenant, not just between a man and a woman, but between a man, a woman, and God. Divorce is what happens when we break that covenant. But we need to understand what a broken covenant is. There's a penalty for violating a covenant. When the Almighty instructed Moses to ask the people, "Are you willing to enter into a covenant with me?" They said yes. We ask the same things when two people get married. Are you willing? Is this what you want to do? Hopefully they say yes, and they become married. At Mount Sinai, that type of covenant, once they said yes and God came down and he gave them the terms of the covenant, Moses sacrificed animals and sprinkled blood over the people, and it created a blood covenant. Now, a blood covenant is one type of covenant. Then you can also have a salt covenant, and there's other types of covenants that were used in Hebrew history. But the blood covenant was so important because when the people violated that by creating the golden calves and worshiping them, it infuriated God. And when you violate a blood covenant, then blood must be spilled by the offending party. It's basically, when you enter into a blood covenant, it's a covenant whose penalty is death. That's the only way to say it. Which is why the sacrifice of the animals was a bookmark. It was a constant reminder to the people that they had violated the blood covenant and that the penalty of that was death. Moses intervened and begged God not to destroy the people. And God basically said, okay, Moses, for you, I will find another way. Fortunately for us, that other way is Yeshua. His blood, which was completely innocent, never violating the Torah, was sufficient payment for us violating that blood covenant with the Almighty. That's why he needed to spill his blood properly as a sacrifice so that we can remain free from that death penalty. A marriage covenant is a little different. There's not a penalty of death, but there is still a penalty, and the penalty depends on the promises and the terms of the marriage. The one thing they all have in common, though, if you happen to listen to the marriage teaching, you understand that a woman needs a spiritual covering. And when you terminate a marriage through divorce, that covering remains with the man or the ex-husband until the woman remarries or the man dies. Now, it's different when a woman is widowed. If a woman's husband dies or passes away, however you want to say that, however you want to refer to that, her spiritual covering remains with her husband's spirit until she remarries, because her husband's spirit remains faithful. The terms of a marriage is until death do us part. However, the spirit part is different. Just because the man is physically no longer alive on the earth doesn't mean that his spirit isn't resting somewhere. So her covering remains with her deceased husband until she remarries. What is different in divorce is that the man is still alive. He is still her spiritual covering until she remarries, which is why men typically have such a difficult time separating themselves, or women have such a difficult time separating themselves. And it gets kind of tricky in here when you understand that. But the one thing we can say right up front is when two people need to be divorced or that marriage needs to end, it is because one or the other or both people were involved in some type of sin that caused that. And we know that sin is a violation of God's instructions, or failure to follow God's instructions. That's what leads to divorce, is somebody is not following God's instructions. So we have a broken covenant, a violation of a covenant. Somebody didn't keep their promise. So let's look at what the Torah has to say about divorce. Leviticus 21:14 says, "A widow, a divorced woman, a profane, or a harlot, he shall not take, but he shall take a virgin of his own people to be his wife." Now, this verse is speaking only to the priests, sons of Aaron. We cannot use this verse to qualify any terms concerning divorce unless we are speaking directly about the Levitical priesthood. So, there were different rules for different groups of people. Some applied just to the priests, like this one, but some applied to everyone. And you need to understand the difference so that later we understand when Yeshua is talking about divorce, who he's talking about. Because sometimes he speaks to a very, very select group of people, about a very select group of people. Leviticus 22:13. If the priest's daughter be widowed or divorced, and she doesn't have a child, she can return to her father's house, as in her youth. Okay? Still speaking about Levitical priests. They were the example to the example. They are, if everyone at Mount Sinai, everyone who accepts God as creator, we're the example. We set the example to the rest of the world. The priests are designed to be the example to the example. So they have a higher standard. They have a higher calling. Numbers 30, verse 9. But of every vow of a widow, and her that is divorced, wherewith they have bound their soul, shall stand against her. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that this is something special. It is something special in a special way. So don't take it out of context. This is about a vow being unto God. If you go back and you look at verses 1 and 2, it sets the standards of what they're talking about through the rest of this phraseology here. It's coming down and it's giving instructions based on those certain vows that are for specific people. Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 5. Now this really lays out the foundational understanding for the people. And it says, when a man takes a wife and married her, and it come to pass that he find no favor in her eyes, because she's found some uncleanliness in her, let him write her a bill of divorce and give her, put it in her hand, basically, and she sends her out of the house. Now, favor in this passage is translated from the Strong's number 2580, which means grace. Wait a minute, you mean there's grace in the Old Testament? Well, yeah. You see, the only recourse a woman had when a man fails to be a good husband is to remove grace from the home. And then she would obtain a get, that bill of divorce, and it's very detailed, it's very specific. It contains the who did what, who violated the covenant, and why. And for a man to sit down, and he would look at his ketubah, which is the written out promises that they made to each other, and he would say, okay, she did this. Wait a minute, why did she do that? Was it something I did, or was it something that she did? Uncleanliness in this instance doesn't mean that she's dirty. Comes from the Strong's word 2172, meaning nakedness or indecency. And because this is alluding to adultery, it's the second reason for divorce. And take special note, because it's mentioned second, it's believed by a lot of people that adultery can be forgiven if the husband chooses to. Now, I know that kind of sounds funny sometimes, but in Scripture, just because somebody's unfaithful doesn't mean you have to get divorced. It can be forgiven. Remember Ezekiel 18. It's very specific about this. If a righteous man sins, none of his righteous works will be mentioned. But if a evil man or a wicked man repents and does what is good, none of his evil acts will be mentioned. It's the same principle applied here. Just because someone makes a mistake, you can forgive them. If someone does something intentionally and they are sorry, they can be forgiven. So just because the common understanding in modern times is, well, they could just write her a note and send her out of the house. It's not like getting a blank piece of paper and say, go away. It has to be very specific so that when she shows it to any potential new husband, he knows exactly what he's getting into. Now, here's what happens after they're separated. It says, when she's departed out of the house, she may go and be another man's wife, unless it's a Levitical priest. And if the latter husband hate her and write her a bill of divorcement, now, there's specific reasons for this. Again, it goes back to the previous phrases, or previous verses. He gives it to her and sends her out of his house. Or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, the first husband, which sent her away, can't take her again to be his wife. After that, she is defiled, for that's an abomination before Jehovah, and you will not cause the land to sin. Okay? When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home for 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife, which he has taken. We are allowed to remarry. Okay? It's right there. It's in Scripture. We can remarry. No problem. No muss, no fuss. And we're given a year to build that relationship. An entire year is given to build that relationship. But notice up in verse 4 and 5, verse 4, if someone's sent away, you don't get a chance to come back. You transfer that spiritual covering to someone else, and through a divorce, you don't get to pick it up again. You are no longer to be responsible for her once she has another husband. Do you follow that? It's kind of where a lot of our alimony laws are based in the United States today. You know, a lot of places say you pay alimony until the woman is remarried. Okay, that's fine. It follows the same thing, but financially is far different than spiritually, because when you remarry, that spiritual covering is transferred to the new husband. And God says it is abomination if you attempt to take it back. That's what it's all about. Now, the modern Christian view of divorce is far different than anything we've just talked about. Many church doctrines consider it sin because of the negative way it's described in the Bible, such as the conversation with the woman at the well. Okay? So let's look at why that is. The primary reason there's confusion is we fail to understand it, because we try to force our modern concepts into the Bible. Okay? Many church doctrines are based only on part of Yeshua's teachings, and divorce is absolutely no different. If we look at Matthew 5:31 and 32, he starts out, "It has been said." Now, even before that, we go back, we know who he's talking to. He's only talking to the disciples. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. We need to retitle that. It needs to be called the Teaching on the Hill or something, because only the disciples were here. And he spends a lot of time giving the difference and telling you the difference between what the Pharisees are saying and what God is saying. Okay? He spends a lot of time laying out some differences here. And up in, I think it's verse 19, it's just like 10 or 12 verses before this, he points to the Pharisees. And here he does it again. Whenever Yeshua says, "It has been said," or "You have heard it said," he's pointing directly to the Pharisees. And he says, "It's been said that whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement." Now, the Pharisees, being the priests, the example for the example, were held to a different standard. Okay? And look what he says in verse 32 about this. "I say to you, whoever shall put away his wife, except for the cause of fornication causes her to commit adultery, and whoever shall marry her that is divorced commit adultery. The priests were marrying and divorcing like the rest of the people. They were not maintaining the law. They had decided that they were above the law. They didn't need to do what God said to do. And this, he's getting specific here with them. He says, look, you've heard it said that they can do this. They don't have this chance. We need to understand who he's talking to, who he's talking about, because without that context, we lose the meaning of what he's saying. And he's saying the example to the example needs to get their house together. That's what he's talking about. Matthew 19. Again, the Pharisees are saying, why did Moses say, give her a right of divorcement and put her away? And he said to them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. He's not referring to Adam and Eve here. He's referring to the Torah. And I say to you, whoever shall put away his wife except for fornication. Let's define fornication. Fornication, immorality, doesn't always mean adultery. It can mean prostitution. Okay? The priest being held to that higher standard, that was their only allowable divorce offense. Okay? And even then, they couldn't marry someone who had been divorced. They had to marry someone who had never been married. So, I say to you, whoever shall put away his wife except for adultery, prostitution, and shall marry another commits adultery, and whoso marry her puts away, she causes her to commit adultery. And it's the same teaching in Mark 10 as in Matthew 19. Okay? Same teaching. He's speaking directly to the Pharisees this time. And he's telling them, get your house in order. Because you're doing it wrong. You've got it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And many, many, many church doctrines today who claim that the only standard for divorce is because of adultery don't understand who Yeshua was speaking to, who he was speaking about, and what he was referring to. And the only way you can put that together is to go through and look at everything that is written about divorce, because there's something very important. God never changes. God never, ever changes. So how can we say that Yeshua said that the only reason for divorce is adultery? The way the Greek language is written, the meaning here is not that the woman may have committed adultery, but the man was intending to commit adultery. Okay? There's some intent there. He would therefore give his wife a divorce bill, a get, and Yeshua said, no, you can't do that. You're causing her to sin. When you cause someone else to sin, it's much, much worse on you. Too many pastors who don't understand what Yeshua was talking about get this wrong. Because everything Yeshua teaches must agree with the Torah. And that's the reason for the confusion. They want to think that God changed. They want to think something happened. And it didn't. God never changes. John 1:1 reads, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. For Yeshua to be the Word of truth. He cannot change the truth. For him to be God, he cannot change. In Mark 3:25, he spoke the words, "If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand." You cannot have complete conformity and continuation in Scripture if there's any type of conflict. If there's any type of contradiction, it can't be true. Because God doesn't change and will not be divided and cannot fail, Yeshua can't say anything, or he cannot instruct anyone to do anything which would violate the Torah. It's that simple. You look back and you see the foundation of divorce and how it is to be applied in the Torah and in the prophets. Yeshua cannot change that. He will not change that because he will not change. Divorce is allowed when grace is removed from the home because of a violation of the marriage covenant. It's that simple. It's that simple. If the man is not providing, if he is not being a husband, it's the woman's responsibility to remove grace from the home so that she may obtain a get, that bill of divorce. Divorce is allowed because of adultery, but adultery can be forgiven. Divorce is not allowed simply because things got tough, okay? It was a hard year. You know what? The neighbors got something to eat and we don't. That's no reason to divorce. It's a reason to pull together and work together that much harder. But it's not a reason for divorce. When we follow our Creator's instructions, they are a constant reminder. They're a constant reminder to be faithful to God and to the covenant of marriage and any other promises we make. I'm going to leave you with this thought today. And I want you to consider back to the people you know who may be divorced, and you may be divorced if you're listening to this. But if you're honest, and you know the entire situation, something happened that would cause two married people to separate. And typically, what's going to happen to cause two people to want a divorce is one or both have violated God's instructions. They have failed to follow the instructions given to us by our Creator. Not only is divorce a broken covenant, but it's caused by a broken covenant. Did you catch that? When we break our covenant with God to be obedient, it has a ripple effect, and it causes us to do things that we shouldn't do. And it hurts not only us, but it hurts God. It hurts the people in our family, and it hurts the people around us. Divorce is a serious, serious situation. A lot of states like to claim that they have a no-fault divorce law. Well, you know, divorce is always someone's fault. Whether it's one person or both people, someone needs to step up and be responsible. Hopefully, understanding what divorce is and understanding what marriage is one step that we can all take to not needing a term of divorce when we're married. As long as we're faithful as long as we're obedient to the covenants that we have made and keep the promises that we have made, hopefully there won't be any need to pay any penalties. And with that, I will end. I pray this has been a blessing to you and that you have a better understanding of what divorce is. May the Almighty shine His face towards you and bless you and keep you. Shalom.